6:01. So why don't we get started, everybody? My name's Ron Wagner, class of '89 from the College of Communications with a degree in advertising. I'm going to be your MC, your host for the night. And what you're attending right now is the fourth installment of 5 in the Creating Content series. And this one is titled Social Media and Digital Journalism. We have got 3 great industry pros with us and a fourth hopefully on the way. And they're going to talk to you about the arc of their career, typical day in the life, lessons learned, traits you need, the first job, and where they see the future and trends going with their particular piece of the communications world. But you don't need to hear from me. Why don't we have the panelists uh, introduce themselves? Jen, would you like to go first and talk about job, title, degree?
Sure. Since we're outing ourselves with age, Jen Simons, class of '98, School of Communications. I currently work at Barstool Sports, and I'm the EVP, which is Executive Vice President, Head of Programming Development and Production.
Ryan.
Yeah, hi guys, my name is Ryan Beckler. I'm the Deputy Head of Social Media at NBC News. Graduated 2013, have been doing social media news for about a decade now, and glad to be here. Thank you, Mike and Ron and others for putting this event tonight, and Jen, Katie, I think this will be a lot of fun.
And Katie, last but not least.
Hi, I'm Katie. I graduated in 2012 and I majored in PR. And I am the senior social producer at the Drew Barrymore Show. And like Ryan, I've been doing social media for the past, I guess, like 9-ish years, and I live in New York City.
All right. Well, I'm going to ask a few questions to get the conversation started. And I want to go backwards a bit. And I want to ask each of you to talk about how you really got your foot in the door, your first role, and then kind of take me through a quick arc of your career. So who wants to go first? Well, let's ask Katie. Katie went last with intros. She can go first.
Sure. Yes. So basically, just to preface this a little bit, the summer before my senior year of college, there was this show on TV called Oprah Behind the Scenes. And it basically followed all of the producers of her TV show. And I was like, oh my gosh, like I'm majoring in PR. Like, I wish I was working in TV. Like I have to get out of this. But all I was getting was like nibbles from PR firms after I graduated. And so I graduated, I got a postgraduate internship at a big PR firm in New York City, where I got placed into the digital department. And so that's kind of where I got my foot in the door. And my first job was managing the social media pages for like Swiffer, Mr. Clean, Cascade, like all of these different Procter & Gamble brands. But what I really wanted to be doing was working in TV. So from there, I went to an agency that had TV clients, but I was still doing the same kind of job. So I worked a little bit on TV, and then from there, I got a job at Lifetime, the TV network. And then from there, I was able to get my dream job, which was working at The Tonight Show, starring Jimmy Fallon in New York. And since then, I've worked at a couple of different TV networks, but I have mostly worked in the talk show space.
Well, I want to get into some lessons learned with some follow-up questions. But Ryan, tell me about, how you got started and landed to where you are now.
Yeah, so I fell into this industry a little bit. I was actually kind of a lost student, I would say, for the first couple of years at Penn State. I was taking engineering classes all the way up to junior year, and then I got involved in Onward State, covering the football team fall of 2011, and then transitioned over to doing general news, covering the community at large for my last 2 years. Graduated in 2013, And I would say it was somewhere in that probably fall senior semester where I realized this is something I want to do long term. I enjoyed news, but I specifically wanted to do social media news because I could see how powerful it was, and believed in its reach and its impact. So after graduation, I worked at statecollege.com for a couple months, and then moved to New York City. My first job at Fusion, which I guess we can go into in a little bit. And then I did a year at New York Daily News, a couple years at a place called Vocative, where I did some long-form journalism as well as the day-to-day social media aspect. And then I got to NBC News about 4 years ago, and we cover everything under the sun here. But that start in local news at Penn State and State College was really crucial to my development overall.
And Jen?
Yeah, sure. I was one of the first classes in my high school to get a TV production class, which seems crazy now because I'm sure every high school has that. I fell head over heels in love with it. Like, it was just the greatest thing. Every part of it I loved. Went to Penn State. I actually didn't get into film school because I made the mistake of taking an 8 a.m. biology class freshman year and did not balance my work-life lifestyle too well. So that was pretty upsetting to me because all I wanted to do was make films and videos. So I had to do film theory, which in hindsight was the greatest thing that could have ever happened. It helped me hone my writing skills. By the time I graduated, I could churn out a 60-page paper like it was nothing. So I think that was a big lesson of like seeing, the hardships, or what you think are the hardships and how you can turn them around. I met someone at Penn State actually who was a friend who was 4 years older, hired me as a production assistant in New York when I was interning. From there, I met another man, hired me on commercials. I got into production work as a production assistant on commercials and feature films. And so from there, I met someone who was like, you should try television. There's a bit more of a work-life balance. And I was curious about it. So I interviewed for a job on the Chris Rock show, and I just fell in love all over again with every part of it. I was in the field, in the studio. And from there, I really worked in TV until maybe the last like 2 or 3 years ago when I got into more of digital media. So it just clearly, we were talking before everyone else joined about like you can trace your career path back to a single starting point. So yeah, that's the overall arc.
Well, let me stick with you, Jen, with the follow-up question. I asked the same of Katie and Ryan. So we've got about 70 students on the call, and they're learning a lot of this in theory in class, but I'm sure they want to know what the typical day in the life is you at Barstool Sports.
Yeah, for me, it's there's a lot of email, so get used to that. There's a lot of dealing with people and people management, judgment calls. A lot of what we do is subjective. We're in the comedy space, so you got to make a decision and you got to act quick about how to problem solve and get content out there, and trust your judgment and listen to the audience. Number one, of what are they liking? It's very different than what Ryan's doing in news. We're really looking at like, what does our audience want to see? How can we serve them up? How can we give them as much content as they want? And how can we be everywhere for them to find us? So I think a typical day is, it starts early sometimes and it goes late. We're 24/7 in the sense that we cover news and pop culture. So that never stops. It's weekends. So it's really just judgment calls and emails and people management and figuring out what's the next piece of content we want to put out.
And Katie, typical day for you.
Sure. So I would say at a talk show, like the bulk of your responsibility every day is watching the show and then deciding how you want to strategically chop it up and post it on our various like social media platforms. So for instance, at the Drew Barrymore show, that might mean our Facebook audience tends to be older than our other platforms. So if there is a clip about parenting, then we might find a way to put that on Facebook, or something more family related. But if it's more of a news story or like a Drew's News Moment, we might think about putting that on Twitter or, and that kind of thing. Another big part of my job is pitching ideas to both Drew and the talent. So for instance, the Oscars are coming up, and Drew wants to do a lot of stuff with the Oscars. And so right now we've been brainstorming and kind of like putting together video pitches and social media pitches for her and for different guests like leading up to the Oscars. And then I would also say that as a social media manager, a big portion of your job is like analytics and kind of like looking at the numbers behind things. And so every day or every week, I'll look at our insights and kind of say like, let's do a little bit less of this, or this worked really well. How can we adapt that for different segments or for use in the future? So,
Katie, you brought up a good point, and I don't want to let this go by. I got into the College of Communications because I hated numbers, but I live by numbers. And is that a tip that you would share with most of the people on the call? Get in love with numbers, even if you may not like them all that much?
definitely. I think like part of working in digital media is like you're kind of married to the numbers, like YouTube views matter. All of these platforms have different algorithms, and you really have to find ways to work with the algorithms to get your content shown. So like, you might be surprised on YouTube, like longer form content often gets served more than like short form content, or, like every platform's different, but you really have to kind of study the numbers to figure out how to get your content to be seen.
Ryan, tell me about a day for you.
Yeah, every day is an adventure. I'll say that much. For anybody who's been on Slack before, it's a lot of Slack, a good amount of email as well. New stories, new challenges every day. We're doing 24/7 breaking news on Twitter, on Facebook, Instagram, TikTok, other platforms. But I think sometimes when, maybe this was more in the early 2010s, but the early, I guess, line on like social media were just like, oh, like you guys tweet, you guys Facebook post, you guys put stuff on Instagram, and there's just so much more than that. And Katie went into it a little bit. Like we're working with reporters across our newsroom for Facebook Lives. We're going to Twitter threads to go deeper into these stories. We're working on Instagram stories to take you live on the scene of some of these developments, working with special projects. We just had a rollout of a project called Plan Your Vaccine that we just launched that kind of centralizes a lot of basically information and ways people can plan to get their vaccine in the coming weeks and months. And in summary, our goal every single day is to inform, and that goes for all platforms.
One quick timeout. I just want to remind everybody that's participating as an attendee that we'll field some questions along the way, so don't be afraid to submit questions through chat. Next question I had, Jen, what are one of the things that surprised you as you grew in your career? Surprised you, or was a milestone moment, or something you learned that really helped you in your career?
I think the thing that I learn every day is you never really, and this applies a lot to college age people, is you never really feel like you know what you're doing necessarily, and that's okay. I think if you do, then maybe it's time to look for the next job and the next challenge. To always be challenging yourself, I think, is a good thing. The whole fake it till you make it, there's a bit of truth to that. I don't think to an arrogant degree, but I definitely think that's the thing that as you get older and more comfortable with yourself and you talk to more people, you see that when people make that next step in their life or their career, they're nervous. They don't know what they're doing. And that's fine. I think that's good. That keeps the edge on all of us. And I think that's where we can get really creative and try new things. So that's probably my biggest thing.
Katie?
I would say like just like putting myself back in like my senior frame of mind. I think one thing that surprised me was like, I'm sure we all have a parent or many of us have a parent that's like been in the same job for like 10 or 20 years. and has like really like stuck with it. I know my dad has had the same job for like 20 years, but I think that my parents kind of led me to believe, or like put more pressure, or I put more pressure on myself for what my first job was going to be. And I, in hindsight, I really should not have done that, because I think in communications, like there is a lot more like job movement, and you have a lot more freedom, and like just like what was most important was getting my foot in the door anywhere. And then once your foot is in the door, then you kind of have the freedom to like kind of narrow down what you really want to do. But yeah, I think I expected to be sticking in the same job for like 10 years, but that was like definitely not the case.
So would you say, don't be surprised when you get that first job that maybe it's not all that you hoped it would be, and don't be afraid to make a move to something else?
Definitely. And like, even if your first job isn't in like the vertical of communications that you want to be in, like you're not stuck in that for the rest of your life. Like you can always kind of pivot and get where you want to be.
Mhm. Ryan, surprises,
Yeah.
learn.
Surprises. At least in this job, I think like the mental day-to-day on demand. I mean, and sorry, not the mental, like the day-to-day mental demand of the job, and that it requires like your best every day. I don't want to say that's surprising, but just that, you know, you have a second of lapse, or you know, a second of oversight on a detail or something like that. And I think it's just one of those jobs where it's, you know, it demands extreme attention to detail of our whole team. And that's one of the things that we preach. And the other thing is that these networks evolve so quickly, right? Like TikTok was really just taking off, what, like 16 months ago, give or take. And, you know, it got so big so quickly that, you know, it really forced our team to kind of look and say, what, you know, what can we do here? How can we serve our audience here? Is there an audience here? And, you know, you're seeing similar conversations happening on other platforms right now that like we're taking a look at, and those kind of things. So the social space evolves very quick. And if you're too slow, there's a chance that you could be left behind. At that same point, we're not going to hop into every single social platform out there because we simply don't have the resources to do so, to do it well. So it's totally a balance act, if you will, and evolving day by day, week by week, and we'll continue to do so.
Let me do a quick pause here. I see that we do have a few questions coming in via Q&A, so I'm going to pop that open and see if we can't ask a few. Here's a good one. Can each of you talk about how you target specific audiences on different social platforms? Who would like to take that first? How do you
I can go
engage
first.
different audiences on different platforms?
Yeah, for us at Barstool, it really is, we look at how we edit our content for specific platforms. As Katie mentioned, YouTube definitely favors 10 minutes plus in their algorithm. Facebook sweet spot tends to be around 1 to 3 minutes. That changes like every month when we talk to them. TikTok is, as you know, a very different style of editing and different style of content altogether. Clubhouse, you know, is the new thing that everyone's talking about, which is very different. It's not even video based. So for us, like we might have one video and our producers export 7 to 10 versions of that same video, platform specific. So what do we think is going to trip the Instagram algorithm? It's going to work on YouTube. So that's really how we do it. We put all of our content everywhere. So we're not, I see a reason why the Drew Barrymore show uses Facebook in a certain way, but we're very different. We put everything everywhere. It's just we modify exactly like the form of the video to make it fit that platform.
And do the numbers and the data and the engagement metrics really tell you how to best use the platform?
Yes, I mean the thing is you're beholden to them. So, you know, we joke with our Facebook contact a lot of like they move the goalpost a lot. We're always trying to figure out where we are. You know, we're more edgy. So we get in trouble a little bit more, but yes, it does. But we tend to lean a little bit more of like, if we think it's funny, we're going to put it out there and we'll see. The audience will tell us if they like it or not.
Ryan, that question that we just asked, we posed from the audience, kind of follows on the heels of what you started to talk about, evaluating platforms for audiences. So how do you decide the type of content for each platform should you go down into the different platforms?
Yeah, so say like a big news event happens, for our team, it kind of causes like a chain reaction, right? So maybe on Twitter, since it's so instantaneous, maybe we'll do like a text-only tweet right away on Twitter or something like that. And then on Facebook, maybe we won't put that text on. Maybe we'll wait for the link to come down 5 or 10 minutes from now, or 1 minute from now. On Instagram, we have a template system where if you go on our account, you'll be able to see the different breaking news templates and things that we have. And TikTok, our producer might decide that it's that she can provide our content style on that particular story. So it's it changes. Obviously Instagram's more of a visual platform. Twitter's like an instantaneous content information platform. Facebook, we do a lot of video links, those kind of things. And it's really kind of, for us, it's, we're ingesting the information and we're trying to figure out what's the best way to, present that information to our audience on each different platform.
Okay. Katie, let me ask you the same question. Then I'm going to pivot to introduce Derek after this. So Katie, how do you determine the content for the platforms that you use?
Yeah, I think I kind of touched on this a little bit before, but basically, we almost kind of have in our minds like a different persona for each platform based on just like some of it is scientific, and in the back end of all these platforms, you can see the demographics for each of them. But some of them, like after you've read enough comments, you just kind of like learn the personality of your fans on each platform, and different fans definitely want different things. But so now I work at the Drew Barrymore Show, but back in the day I spent like 3 years working at the Tonight Show, and like we would learn that the fans on Twitter were some of the most loyal fans, and they would live tweet every single episode. So if like we were going to tease a big segment, we might use our fans on Twitter to kind of like catapult that and like try to get like news outlets to like start picking it up. But yeah, basically I think that we found that like our Facebook fans tend to be older. Obviously TikTok tends to be a lot younger, and Twitter somewhere in between. And so we kind of classify our segments, our show segments by those metrics, and then we post accordingly.
Good question from the attendee. I want to do a quick pause here, and I want to introduce Derek Major. Derek, you've got an audience of pushing 80 people here waiting for you to tell them all about your background and kind of like the growth of your career, if you don't mind.
Sure. I graduated from Penn State in 2008. Kind of stayed in State College for 2 years, and then my first job was as a sports writer for the Lewistown Sentinel. And since then, I've been in Virginia twice, New Mexico, and New York, just writing everything from sports to local news, cops and courts, education, everything.
And your role now is?
Now I am the digital editor for Black Enterprise Magazine. I cover government and entrepreneurship for the magazine.
Now, when you and I spoke one-on-one, I loved your story because I think it was really one of kind of grit, perseverance, resilience. And I wanted you, and I wanted the rest of our panelists, Jen, Ryan, and Katie, talk about maybe some of the traits that are really needed to succeed as a journalist, as a content creator, as a social media editor. What are some of the traits that are important for today's students and young professionals to have? Derek, do you want to
sorry.
Go right ahead.
I'd say resilience is needed because this is not a easy field to get into. A lot of people I know who graduated with degrees in journalism, trying to do different things in media, have left because of how difficult it is to not only get into, but also to stay in it and stay positive about it. So you definitely need to have some resilience, and a kind of a hard shell of an attitude.
Katie?
Yeah, I would completely agree with what Derek just said. Like sometimes working in communications, especially in New York City, can feel like trying to stay on like a mechanical bull, you know, like you're something crazy is always happening. But one thing I was thinking about the other day was when I was a senior at Penn State, I remember like kind of resenting business majors because they all had jobs like squared away at the beginning of the school year. And I felt like I still had to like continue to hustle all year long. I had to get like, you know, I was in like a club every night of the week. I had on-campus internships, I had off-campus internships. And like, I just remember comparing like my college experience to my business friends. And I realized recently that that hustle like never stops. Like you're always either trying to keep a job, trying to get a new job, trying to hustle to do something while a trend is like still hot, or, you know, I don't know. It's just like the hustle it never ends.
You know, just a quick story. The engineers always bothered me. When my friends were graduating with $50,000 degree jobs and I was thrilled to get my $15,000 a year to start, boy, they bothered me. But you know what? I think grit and resilience and perseverance are important. Jen, what traits do you think?
I mean, my best friend and roommate was a business major, and her mom said to me senior year, "You made the biggest mistake of your life majoring in communication. You're never going to get a job. You're never going to make money. You're never going to support yourself." And literally, that gave me like the drive where I was like, I'm still proving her wrong. Like you can see, like it's been over 20 years and I'm still thinking about it. So what Derek and Katie said is like absolutely right. I think being humble, being thick-skinned, being open to opportunity, being open to people. I also think, you know, going on what we talked about in the last question, get familiar with each platform. When a new technology comes out, immerse yourself in it completely, obsess over it, dive into it, use it, get comfortable with it. I think that just keeps you going, and just constantly be talking to people younger than you. I think they're the ones that have all the ideas and know what's going on, and you got to, you know, really just respect their opinion and stay in touch with them.
Ryan?
Yeah, I agree with what everybody said. Great answers. You know, humble, be ready to evolve. Like I don't think my job existed 8 years ago, 10 years ago. I don't even, it might not existed 5, 6 years ago. And it probably won't look the same 4, 5, 6 years from now. So it's kind of a constant evolution. And if you have to stay open-minded. If not, other people are going to pass you by quickly, and you have to be ready to shift, you have to be ready to change your strategies just when you think you have it all figured out. Just when everything looks all set, there's always room for improvement. And the way this industry changes, you have to keep looking for those improvements, or if not, people are going to pass you by. So yeah, that's my advice.
Sounds like curiosity is an enduring trait.
Curiosity is huge. Yeah, curiosity is huge. Stay curious, and that will take you a long way in this industry. Well,
There's a quote I heard last week that sounds like it applies based on what all of you said. Yesterday's home run won't win tomorrow's game. And it seems like don't rest on your laurels either, because something else new is coming. You know, we had a question. I just opened up the questions, and one of them was, how big are the teams that you're within or within your group? How big are the content and the social teams?
Our team at Black Enterprise is about 20, as far as the editorials, about 20 people. But we actually don't communicate much. We have like maybe like a weekly budget meeting, but outside of that, everybody pretty much knows what they have to do, and it's kind of on you to get it done. So I feel like that's the type of system I do well in. I know some other places I worked at where we had micromanagers who wanted to know everything you were doing every second of the day. And in media, with things changing so fast, you can be writing a story and, you know, something comes in that changes your entire day. So I think, you know, the ability to stay flexible and to kind of just create your own beat and maybe your own path is kind of helps.
Mm-hmm. Now, Ryan, in the news area as well, like Derek, how big of a team is it you're involved in? And are you managing a big team?
Yeah, so we're under, so NBC News, obviously, it contains nightly news. MSNBC contains a whole litany of programs and shows. Under our direct teams that manage basically the NBC accounts and the MSNBC accounts, we have, looking now, we have about 12. And then we have a class of 4 or 5 interns every semester too. So it's a big team. It's a 24/7 team though. So we have, folks based in London, folks based around the country, and we're essentially rolling on a 24/7 basis. So having that amount of resources is great, but when you spread it over the course of, X amount of hours in the week, it's, it'll always feel thin to me because I think there's always more we can do. But no, we're very fortunate to have the amount of resources we do, but that allows us to really let people have some more specialization, whether it's on Instagram, whether it's on TikTok, whether it's on live events, it's on certain show coverage, those kind of things.
Jen?
Yep. So we have a team of probably about 40, we call them producers. They shoot, they edit, they cut up stuff for social media. And then we have probably a similar size team, maybe a little less, that focus strictly on social media. A lot of our talent, which is about 70 people, do some of their own social as well, but that's kind of like the creative support behind them. That doesn't include the business side, sales, marketing, engineering, product, finance, those things.
Mm-hmm. Katie?
At the Drew Barrymore show, there are 7 people. So there are 2 doing social, 2 writers / like web editors, and 2 video editors, and then a director.
Okay. I'm going to ask another question here that was posed by one of our attendees. They asked about the tips you have for networking or finding that first job coming out of school or grad school. What are the things that could work to help build that network or get on the short list for open jobs? Whoever wants to take that first.
I can jump in on that one. I mean, for us at this job at Barstool specifically, the thing we look for is someone who's already passionate and doing what they say they want to do. So if you want to make videos or memes or clips, like, just start doing it. You can rip any of our stuff from YouTube, cut it. It doesn't have to look perfect. Put it to music, change it however you want. That tends to get our attention a lot. You can DM it, tweet it at any of our talent. We're all obviously very public. I think reaching out, like, I do pay attention to Penn State people when they reach out. I'm not on LinkedIn that often. There's just a ton of other stuff, that is kind of just noise. I think being persistent and doing what it is you say you want to do, just show people. If you want to be a writer, start a blog and send them links to your blog. If you want to edit video, do that, send it to people, just get noticed. We find a lot of our people that way, a lot of our people.
Okay.
Yeah, I'd say if you were trying to get into the business, it used to be, when you graduated, that would be the time to kind of try to build something up. Now you probably have to have, if you're doing something in audio, you might want to have a podcast before you graduate. If you do video, you might want to have some video stuff, on social media before you graduate. Now it seems like if you want to, kind of put yourself at the head of the pack, you have to have been doing something before you finish school. That's, graduating and then trying to decide all that is not enough in today's world.
And now I don't want to scare the people that are listening, but would it be safe to say, or would you agree or disagree? Don't wait till the end of that junior year to look for internships. Build your portfolio and networks and connections sooner than later. Katie?
Yeah, I don't know if this specifically answers like the networking question, but when I really wanted a job, I would kind of look at people's LinkedIns who had the job that I wanted, and I would kind of see like what their background was. For instance, before I got my job at the Tonight Show, I saw that a lot of people had like an improv background, or like they were pursuing comedy outside of work. And so once I kind of saw what backgrounds they looked for, then I spent that time trying to get that background myself. And then when I did get an opening for like talking to somebody, I had like more in common already.
Okay, Ryan?
Yeah, I would say, I mean, everybody's basically said, get some experience for the job you want. I think that's number one. I think to, if you want to be a reporter, start covering your local community. If you want to be in social, like start being active on Twitter, Instagram, TikTok, those kind of things. And thankfully, there's a lot of opportunities on Penn State's campus to do so. The next would be finding a mentor was big for me. I had somebody who kind of took me under their wing under my junior year internship, who I still have a great relationship with. And every crossroads I had along the way, whether it was, that next internship or the first job or the next job or, navigating the workplace and those kind of things, he's been really crucial to my development over the years. He's a Penn Stater as well. And then the next one would be, or the final one would be, once you have some experience under your belt, build yourself either a physical and or virtual portfolio that you can walk into interviews with and basically give them more than just your resume. So instead of, highlighting I did this and this and this, you can actually show them either in a presentation form or a physical form. I think that's always impactful.
One thing that I've noticed is really in communications, a shift in behaviors with media consumption over the past year. Have each of you seen how or seen if the pandemic has changed the type of stories of importance, the type of media or platforms of importance? What have you seen happening with customer and audience behaviors over the past year?
I can jump in. We've seen that definitely. There was a little bit at the beginning of the pandemic, a shift away from podcasts because people weren't commuting, weren't going to the gym, weren't driving in cars. We saw a shift to video. So we kind of pivoted, and that trend is continuing because people are sitting in front of their computer nonstop now, and it's very easy to watch a lot of video. So we've seen that podcasting, and it's coming back a bit, but that was an interesting thing for us of like overall the podcast universe dipped. So that was the biggest thing that we noticed for sure.
Do you think that's a behavior that will stick?
I don't know. I was just chatting with someone at Spotify today. Like a lot of companies are giving the option of you never have to go into an office again. So it'll be interesting to see like what happens and how long that goes on, or do we just slowly get back to like quote normal, with everyone commuting to work. But I think especially in cities like New York, it's like rent costs for offices. I think companies are seeing you can save a lot of money by people working at home, souping up their computer and their personal space to make it more professional for them. So I think it will tick up in the podcast space, but I don't know if it'll ever get back fully to where it is. We'll have to see.
Derek, what have you seen over the past year with behavioral shifts?
After, the pandemic, a lot of, Black Enterprise made a lot of changes. We usually hold events that we have, thousands of people come to dealing with, business entrepreneurship, but we had to move all of those to virtual, and we still got a, overwhelmingly positive reception. And we're still trying to figure out whether or not we're going to be able to go back to the regular type of events we've done in 2022, because we've already canceled all of those out for this year. So everything's going to be virtual. And I think it's going to stay that way, whether or not, we actually get, all the way out of a pandemic, because once you start creating those habits, and like Jen said, the move to telecommuting is only growing, not shrinking. So I don't think that we're going to go back to the, corporate meeting of having 20 to 25 people in an office and in one room for a meeting. I think you're going to see a lot more things go to video and a lot more people just telecommuting from home.
Mm-hmm. Katie, what have you seen with media consumption habits, if they've changed for your line?
Yeah, I've been working in TV for the past like 6 years, and I feel like the competition has been, the competition for eyeballs has been like the stiffest this year, just because There are tons of TV shows, but like TV is also competing with YouTube and like Instagram and TikTok, just for your like time and attention. And so I feel like this year has been a lot harder to break through on social media, and has required a lot more creativity on our part to get both video views and post engagement, I think.
Ryan, it's an interesting point Katie brings up, because we're talking about developing content somewhat in a vacuum for each of our respective companies, but there is that competitive element. I mean, how is it that NBC is seeing behaviors change and making sure that they stay topical to keep gathering eyeballs with the pandemic?
Yeah, when we wake up every day, I mean, our number one goal is just to inform. It's just to deliver good information with context. I think people will always be hungry for good news and information. I would say even more so in times of uncertainty, as we've seen in the past year. We've always done public service journalism, whether it be natural disasters or coronavirus or what have you. But over the past year, we've seen just so many people, especially early on. It was how do I get tested? How can I get a test? Now it's how can I get a vaccine? Or maybe it's how are my unemployment benefits going to change with a new bill in Congress? Or I hear there's a stimulus bill coming. When should I expect money? It's really sometimes it's quite simple questions that people just don't know where to get the answers. So we try to be really direct in delivering that information to them.
You said something great there. Kind of like they always say, politics is local. What's in it for me in my neighborhood, right? So I want to shift to a couple of questions to I think could be of pretty good importance to our listeners. Derek, you talked about events going virtual and maybe not coming back. And Jen, you talked about, well, heck, people might just stay at home and work. What does that do to internships? Because internships, you really got to get that person in the office and teach and train. Do you see your organizations still bringing on interns in a virtual setting? Is there still opportunities for students?
I think so, yes, definitely. I actually think it frees it up to people who can't afford to live in New York City, who don't want to, maybe they have a sick parent or something. I think it gives some more flexibility, because I do still think there will be a hybrid. People will be back in an office. So I think there's a balance, and I think it just opens the door for more people to get involved in a great way that we need, to be honest.
Yeah, I don't see everybody just abandoning an office. Even we still have office space. But like Jen said, being able to telecommute and use the internet to work will make internships easier, because a lot of internships don't pay, and that's a struggle for the intern. And this might make that easy. So now you don't have to pay transportation costs. You don't have to pay rent yourself. You can still get the experience that you were looking for in an internship.
I've never understood not paying an intern. I've always paid my interns, but
Like we're the only field that like still does. I mean, and we've changed. We don't necessarily do that, but it is crazy. I thought of that always, because you think it's so prestigious to work in this field, and you get to be on a movie set or a TV show set, and you should want to be there, but it's so wrong, I think.
Yeah, it was really the norm until about 5 years ago.
Yeah, the change.
Yeah.
It's still kind of the norm. Wasn't there? There was a sports reporter yesterday who posted something about being an unpaid intern in college, and she got attacked on Twitter.
Yeah, it's awful. I mean, even like my first job out of college was a production assistant. I made about 100, depending on what it is, $100 to $175 per day. That going rate for that entry level position has not changed. And that's over 20 years ago. The price of everything has gone up, and that hasn't matched in our field. And it's really quite gross when you think about it.
Just, there's a question raised by one of the attendees specifically about that, about the cost for internships. And certainly sounds like you say a virtual internship is a way to go. And it seems like they're still there for that. So a quick plug for Bob Martin in the College of Communications. For those on in attendance, get to know Bob. But also, I also believe that there is some funding within the College of Communications um, to offset some costs of internships as well, because I think the university recognizes that being able to actually eat and commute is important and afford that internship. So I do know the university offers assistance there with that as well. Uh, Another thing that could be of interest to attendees, are there specific classes or coursework that they can take to prepare for a career that may not be kind of the usual suspect kind of classes already in their major? Are there other things that they can take as electives that can strengthen their position as kind of an up and coming professional?
I'd say, if you could try to take a minor in something that you would want to cover or would want to be interested in. You want to be a politics reporter, taking a few poli-sci classes isn't the worst thing.
Mm-hmm. Katie?
I don't know if this falls under any like current communications classes, but Photoshop is a really big thing. And at Penn State, I never took any Photoshop classes, but I got Photoshop experience from like clubs extracurricularly, and I used that like more than anything. And I know that this is an existing class, but like crisis communications, I think about that class all the time, just because so much of social media is like, either dealing with controversy or trying to put out fires, or, dealing with scandals coming from your brand or organization. So that is like definitely a relevant class.
Jen, what would you say?
I remember Soc 119 with Professor Sam Richards for some reason. He was like my password for a while when like things started. I feel like that was such an interesting class of the psyche of people and how they deal with things and how they think. And I think that in hindsight has been a really pivotal part of what I do. I tend to manage big teams of people, and you have to motivate different types of personalities in different ways. And I think getting an understanding of them is something you don't think about, like if you're going to be in the people field and overseeing large teams, especially creative types who can be a little bit not finicky, but rightfully so. So I think something like psychology or sociology is always interesting to like open your mind and think about how people think of things.
Ryan, what coursework would you recommend?
Yeah, one I really remember was, I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head, but I think it was media ethics with John Sanchez. It kind of walked through kind of some of the dilemmas, journalists face here in and here out, and how to navigate those. And I was really fascinated by that class. And we run into those things every single day. And I take a lot of those lessons forward. I would say one regret that I have is that I didn't take more classes of another language. I think the more, another language, it gives you a whole separate audience group that you can communicate with. And, thankfully our team is, super diverse and has different language experience, and that goes across the whole newsroom. But personally, I think it would have been great to learn another one.
Okay. I want to ask, this has come up with some of the discussions I've had with young professionals. Work-life balance. Uh-oh.
What's that?
Maybe we move on to the next question. What can people expect in each of your areas with balancing work and life in a field, and how can you achieve a semblance of balance? Jen?
I don't know. I really don't know. It's the biggest thing I struggle with on a day-to-day basis. I'm constantly training myself to turn off. I think social media has made it nearly impossible. I think when I talk to people in outside fields, they think I'm crazy with how on we are always. And I mean, Ryan, I can't even imagine in news, because you're dealing with actual real things. I'm talking about like basketball games, or the Golden Globes go too long. So I don't know. I think it's just something you have to work at. I think you need someone in your life to challenge you to turn it off. And you always hear that thing of people on their deathbed never say they wish they worked more. I try to remind myself of that on a constant basis, but I think I've worked predominantly in New York City. I've spent long stints in Los Angeles, and done random things throughout the country. I think New York is really, really bad with this because it's such a small community. It's very competitive. There's always going to be someone that's going to throw themselves into work and work really hard, like really hard. And so it's a hard thing. You just have to prioritize. You have to constantly work at it because we could work all the time.
Katie, how have you approached it?
Well, it's similar to what Jen was saying. Like, I am on call like every night, every weekend. And sometimes it's not just on call, sometimes it's like actively working and posting like constantly. And I feel like the only time I'm not on call is when there's some kind of like national tragedy where it would be inappropriate for a brand to be posting during that time. So that's like the only time I'm like 100% off. But I will say that in my experience, like compared to like me, Jen, Ryan, like all of us, we all work in for jobs where you're like constantly putting out content and you're kind of like commenting on what's happening. But I've had a better work-life balance when I've worked on brands that weren't like necessarily content creators, like where my job was more just kind of maintaining the brand's voice or kind of adapting the brand's voice for social media, as opposed to putting out like funny videos and segments and articles and stuff like that. So I think that you can find areas of digital and social where the work-life balance is better, but I don't think that's any of our areas.
Well, I'll ask Derek and Ryan, this being in the news fields. How do you work at it? How can you set boundaries? Are there boundaries? Are there times when you can turn it off?
Derek, you want to go first?
Yeah, sure. I would say try to find time every day to take a break, even if it's 10 or 15 minutes. Try to turn your work off or at least pause it while you're trying to get something to eat. One thing that I've seen, a lot of studies have said that during the pandemic, since everyone's moved to telecommuting, people are working more because they don't necessarily have to travel to and from work. So trying to find, even if you can't find a set balance, just making sure that you take a few moments a day to kind of clear your head is paramount, especially in this business where everything changes. And working in news, I'm sure Ryan feels the same way. We get information that is daunting to society before anyone else does. So that has an effect on you as you're writing, knowing that people are going to read this and feel some kind of way. So you really should try to, get moments of peace where you can get it. I usually, as soon as I'm done for the day, I usually try to turn my phone off at least for half an hour. I can still, or I'm maybe not off, but on silent, so I can at least still be reached. But I definitely try to take some time to decompress from the day and forget about, the stresses of work.
Ryan?
Yeah, this is a challenging part. It's always, almost in any job I've had in this field, it's been challenging just because, news isn't scripted a lot of times. And, things happen in the middle of the night and there's kind of things, thankfully, because we're covered 24/7, it's usually a situation where if something major happens, like get a heads up or a call or something, it's not like to sit online all night or something like that. But especially in last year, like there's a psychological effect that Derek went into a little bit where, our work lives have changed. We're immersed by this pandemic in a lot of ways. It's affected how we communicate, not only at work, but with our friends and family too. And I think having that empathy with your team and understanding that they're going through things that you might not even be aware of, I think is really crucial. I would say this industry is susceptible to burnout if you don't watch yourself. If you don't watch other people, if you don't watch your friends, you don't watch your team, I think it's extremely possible. And that really goes, I think, from the top down. It's, my boss tells me to take random days off, or tells me to take random half days when I can. Try to pass that down to my team as well. And it's just kind of being, and it's really hard to do, but just kind of keeping your finger on the pulse of just, every single person on your team, and saying like, okay, let's take a breather here, or let's take a step back here. And we say this too, it's like, at the end of the day, like, physical, mental health, psychological health come before the job. And it's like, if you need to take a day, whether it's, in your internship, or, 5 years into your career, you should give yourself that day, and you owe yourself that day, because you're going to work really hard in this industry, and there will always be more. But as everybody else said, like, you could work 24/7 and there would still be things to do. So do not work yourself into that. Find a good support system and go from there.
Well, I want to ask a question that was asked by one of the attendees, and then we'll kind of move to a close, so that we stay within the hour. But one of the questions raised was, is there going to be, from your estimation, kind of a overabundance or saturation coming soon with content creators, producers, and editors in your field? Katie?
I don't know. I don't know if I'm the best person to answer this question, but I'm sure there will be, just because I think like Gen Z is very entrepreneurial, and a lot of people are doing a lot of things from home. But yeah, I don't know.
Jen?
I was going to make a joke that maybe, are we the new lawyers, is what you're saying, where everyone's going to law school. I don't know. I think we've seen the rise of TikTok. We're in the midst of the potential rise of Clubhouse. I think there's always going to be new platforms. I think the younger generation is just so brave with how open they are and sharing everything. So I think there's going to be a shift in content and types of content, and so maybe, but I do think the best stuff is going to rise, and people will learn pretty quickly whether or not they're going to stick it out, whether they have the temperament for it, they want to keep grinding or not. So I don't know the exact answer, but I think I'm hopeful that I don't think it'll be an oversaturation. I think there's it's a liquid, it's going to fill. There's a lot of space to fill.
Certainly there's plenty of news to report on, that's for sure. Ryan and Derek, what's your opinions?
Go ahead, Derek.
To be honest, I think that some markets are already oversaturated. I mean, you look at podcasting now. What celebrity that doesn't have a podcast? So I think in some ways the market will be oversaturated, but like Katie said, the best always rise to the top anyway. It's just about finding the platform that works for you and building an audience through that platform. I think one of the mistakes that content creators make is trying to make sure that everyone sees everything that they do on every platform, and instead of just kind of narrowing it down to a couple few and then building an audience before you kind of branch out.
Yeah, that's a really great point, Derek. You don't have to, put your stuff on 10 different platforms at once if you're just starting out. That's a really great point. I mean, I would just say, as far as the oversaturation question, I don't know if I can provide an industry-wide prognosis, but I think there will always be room for people who provide value to an audience. If they can find an audience and provide value to that audience, there will be room. And sometimes it's just a matter of finding that audience. I think a lot of times. But yeah.
Last question for each of you. Most fulfilling part of your job is what? Katie, should I take the lead off?
Yeah, I would say, I think we all probably work in content of some form because like we're passionate about it. But, I think that life can be hard, and I feel fulfilled when I'm putting out like a piece of content that, you know, gives somebody kind of like a break for a moment, or, you know, make somebody laugh. You know, just because I think that life is hard enough. So that, I think that's like the most fulfilling part of my job.
Derek.
The most fulfilling part of my job is that in working for Black Enterprise, a lot of the things we put out is for an audience that I know how to talk to. So it's the thing that's satisfying is that I'm helping people that I know are interested in the things I want to write, whether it's that, you know, a civil rights activist passed away, or, you know, how Black businesses can get PPP funding during the pandemic. Everything that we write is of importance to an audience, and that's the fulfilling part for me.
How about you, Ryan?
Yeah, I would say delivering good and solid information and also new perspectives to millions of people each day is probably the most fulfilling part. Witnessing history in real time, and also that public service journalism aspect that I mentioned to you earlier, like helping people make decisions based on different things that might be happening in their area or in their lives.
And last but not least, Jen, you get to close the show. What's the most fulfilling
Yeah.
thing for you?
I think definitely I agree, like giving something that the audience enjoys, but something happened this week that I just love. We have one of our producers who was like working at Home Depot, taught himself how to edit. He has evolved so much to where he just sent an entire plan for how to revamp one of our websites to make it more user friendly and to make it more engaging. And so I think like seeing the growth of our young producers turning into, you know, really like strategic thinking adults, and not that they weren't adults, but it was mind-blowing, this plan. No one asked him to do it, he put it together. And so just seeing that evolution of people as they like start to find their voice and what they're really good at, and letting people flourish in that way, I love when I get to see that. I think it's just awesome.
So one more trait, showing initiative. So
Definitely.
with that, we've kept it to right at about 60 to 61 minutes. And I wanted to thank you, Jen, Ryan, Katie, and Derek for participating. This webinar and panel has been recorded, and I believe it's going to be on the Belisario College of Communications website for those that want to revisit it. And with that, we'll say thank you to everybody and for attending, and have a good evening.
Thank you, Ron. Thank you.